Hello, how's it going? I Let's just get this going. I think we're live. Let me know if anyone's watching and if you can hear me and see me. I think we're live. Hello, I'm Matt Heaney. This is the first time I've ever streamed on the Matt Heaney Amps channel. I'm kind of excited to try this. It's something I've always wanted to try, and so I'm really proper hyped to do it. And in this stream, we're going to work together to make a nice, simple app for the Vision Pro headset. Just before we jump in and get coding, I just wanted to quickly talk about why I wanted to stream here. I know I've not touched this channel for quite a long time, and I kind of wanted to quickly say why before we jump in. I've always sort of loved teaching and I love mentoring others, and I always used to love making videos here for YouTube. But they're becoming such a massive job, like editing wise. It took so long, and with other projects, it's one of these projects for YouTube for me that sort of slipped away a little bit. And I always kind of regret it. I really sort of missed it. So I thought, why not? Let's jump in. Let's try a stream. Let's try and get some teaching out there again. Nice and casual, nice and fun, and sort of see how it goes. So I'm sort of here to give it a bit of a try. On the channel, I want to try 2 different kind of ways of streaming across the next couple of weeks. Some are tutorial based, some are more like code along sort of style streams. So this stream here today is going to be one of those where I've got some code prepped. We're going to talk through it and sort of teach you how I made a certain project. But sometimes it'll be some streams where, we're going to sort of come in with an idea, no code prepped, and we're going to chill together, put something together and have some fun with it. But for today, it's going to be the tutorial style. One of the other style streams is coming very, very soon, which I'll chat about in just a moment. But to focus now on this stream, our plan for today is to make a nice basic app, like I said, for the Vision Pro, the brand new headset from Apple. So in terms of what we're going to be making, let me share screen. Like so. Oops, let me move you off of that screen. And hopefully you can now see the correct screen. So what we're going to be making today is, let me also get the chat up down the side. Sorry, I'm very new to this. There we go. I can see the chat. So this is our plan for today. We'll make a nice, simple timer app that's going to be built natively for the Vision Pro headset. So if you follow me on anything for social media, you might have seen me talk recently about a brand new event that I'm running starting this weekend called Swift 24. It's a 24-hour hackathon, getting the community together to make something, whatever you want in Swift. It's all about celebrating your wins, coming together and growing together. That event, like I said, you have 24 hours to make pretty much anything you fancy. So I wanted to make something which will count down your 24 hours. And that is what this is going to do today. A nice little window for your Vision Pro, countdown from 24 hours. So before I forget, it's in my notes. I always knew I'd forget this bit. There is an image for the Swift 24 logo down in the video description. So grab that if you want to use the logo and yours. If not, just have the timer. Entirely up to you as always. In this timer, as you imagine, you can start, you can pause, you can stop, and you can restart your timer when it hits 0. So let's get down to the good bit and let's jump in and do some code. So what I'm going to do is boot up Xcode. And one of the things I do want to say whilst I'm getting Xcode up and going, like, let me know kind of what you think about these streams. Like, I really want to kind of get better at doing these. So I'm always kind of up for feedback, whether it's good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. If it's helpful, I'm more than up for it. So here we go. I've turned my resolution on the screen up to be huge, so hopefully you can see it. If you can't see it at any point, let me know in the comments. Let's have a chat there. So for this, I'm using Xcode 15.2. I'm going to create a brand new project. And for this, I'm going to make a Vision OS app. I'm going to hit next, and we're going to name this. So I'm going to call it Swift 24. Let's call it Vision Pro Timer. A few really important bits to get right on the settings screen here. The initial scene is going to be a window. So with the Vision Pro headset, there's a few different style of apps that we can make. There's a window app, which is almost like a 2D like surface, a window that you can put anywhere in your environment. A volume, which is like a 3D space. So like a model that can sort of pop out on that screen. And there's also like fully immersive environments. For today, we're going to keep things nice and basic to make sure this stream goes okay at the very least. We are going to work with a window, immersive space. It's going to be none. And we're not going to do any tests today, so untick that. I'm going to hit next and save it up on my desktop, which is definitely somewhere nice and safe. Nice. So once we have that, we're taken into Xcode. And the first thing you're going to see is that this is literally just SwiftUI code. If you know your way around SwiftUI, you can get up and running pretty quickly with making these like window apps for Vision Pro. You can do a lot of the heavy lifting just with SwiftUI. I think most of the differences are down to like design, kind of how your app will appear in Vision Pro opposed to being on instead of being on an iPad or an iPhone. But you will go surprisingly far with these basic apps with just SwiftUI. One of the things I'm actually going to do is get rid of the preview, because it never really works for me. Like when you're kind of working on your own projects, work with the preview, it doesn't really work for me very often. And on stream, it's just going to be aggro. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to work with the simulator. Speaking of, before we do anything, let's run that and get up and running. So I've got my target for my app. I have the Apple Vision Pro device selected. I'm going to hit run, and let's get that booted up and going. So mine's down here, all ready to go. And I will hold off for 1 minute if you want to run yours at the same time. So I think one of the really interesting things with the simulator is it's definitely fiddlier to use compared to an iPhone or an iPad. Like I think in terms of like functionality for those devices, this is a lot more straightforward. Like we obviously have tap, we have drag, and things like shake, for example, and gestures and all that sort of stuff. But compared to the Vision Pro, it's fairly limited, not in a bad way, but it just kind of is. When you think compared to the Vision Pro, where this device will be on your face, right? You'll be moving around, be walking around, be ducking, diving, sort of swinging your head around. There's a lot more you can do with that actual device, and that has to come across in the simulator. So the first thing I'm going to do is have a quick look around this simulator. So we have a few options down at the bottom, and a little bit fiddly to get started with, like I said, but once you're up and running, you'll be fine. So firstly, we have this icon down here, which is going to be used for tapping items, so buttons, for example. And with that selected, we can also change the window size of our app like so, and we can hover underneath it to move it around. Again, not as obviously as nice as it would be on an actual device, but you can kind of get that impact. The next option along, if we select that and click and drag, we kind of stand in the spot in the room and look around. So have a bit of a nosy what's going on in the room. Not much behind us, a wall and a door. We have some more options where we can drag left and right, up and down. Next along, we can sort of swing around the room a little bit to sort of see what's going on like that. So we start to combine these, sort of get a better view of our apps. This here is a model. And then finally, we have to zoom in and out like so. We can also reset that camera like so, which is really important. I always mark up the position where I am on the simulator. Very, very important button down there to be able to reset. We can also change the environment. So we have 6 different options currently, 3 different places, both at daytime and at nighttime. So we have a kitchen, a living room, and a museum. Currently, living room at daytime, but we can jump to nighttime, like so, to really sort of see how your app would look in that environment, which I think is pretty cool. So that is a simulator. Hopefully enough time for you to get up and running with that simulator. If you are coding along, let me know if you are. Nice. Some nice comments in there. Thank you very much. Can make me blush. So we can now jump in and we can get to work on our app. So the first thing you might notice is the window we get by default here is kind of huge, right? It's probably good for other apps, but for our timer, it's a fairly small, of course it will open on the wrong screen. It's a fairly small kind of app, right? And I think one of the things that kind of really shifts your thinking when it comes to these apps is that we have no, upper or smaller limit within reason with these anymore. We haven't got to work with an iPhone SE screen size or an iPhone 15 Max screen size. It's just a window size. And the really cool thing about that is that we can change it to be the best sort of fitting for our app. To do that, I'll jump over to the Swift 24 Pro Timer app file. That's a mouthful. And we're going to find where we create our content view. That file there was built for us here in SwiftUI. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new default start size to it using the default size modifier. And we can pass in a width and a height. So this, we're going to have 250 for the width and 220 for the height. I sort of got to these numbers by just deving this app up in the past and sort of seeing what size felt quite nice for it. Just with that, if we hit run, you now see it starts a lot smaller. The user can still make it bigger, make it smaller, something we have to take into account, but we're given that starting size that we probably recommend for our app. So back into the content view and let's get the base of our app set up and ready to go. As I said, it's kind of just mostly SwiftUI for when it comes to putting some of these components together, which I think is incredible because if you know SwiftUI, you're up and running already. So in the body, I'm going to get rid of that VStack to make it nice and empty. And the first thing I'm going to do is make another VStack. Should have just kept it. Another VStack ready for our stuff. So we're going to have the logo, we're going to have our timer and some buttons. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag that image in. So I open our assets. I've got my Swift 24 logo over here. I'm going to drag it in. For now, I'm going to have one size image just to keep things nice and simple on the stream today. Over in the content view, let's add that image to our view. So image, and we can use dot to see what images we have. Mine's called Swift 24, so there it is ready to go. We can make this resizable. We're going to use scale to fit to make sure it doesn't, make sure we have a nice size for it. And we're going to give this a frame, which is a height of 20. So our window is only fairly small at default size. So we only want this logo to be fairly small as well. It is the Swift 24 timer, but I don't want it to be too dominant on the screen. The important thing still is that timer. With that in place, we can now do our text, right? So again, just very kind of standard SwiftUI stuff, which for now, we'll just start by saying 24 hours like so. For the font, we're going to make this work with an extra large title, like so. And for the first two items, that's literally it. For the stack, we're also going to have a little bit of padding around this to make it look a little bit nicer. So padding of about 24. So we have our image and we have our text. Let's hit run and see how it looks in the simulator. As I mentioned, if you can't hear me properly or if you can't see anything properly, let me know. I do talk pretty quick sometimes. So if that's happening, just tell me to slow down and we can make this work. So one of the things I've actually found in the simulator is every time I run this, the app gets further and further away, which is, I don't know if that's just me, but I can zoom in like so, and we can see our logo and we have our time, which will eventually show the countdown for the timer. So we are up and running. We now want to make our buttons, right? And this is going to be a nice reusable view. We have lots of different style of buttons. We're going to have a button for to start, to stop, to pause, and to cancel when that timer has finished, when it's hit 0, so we can restart back to 24 hours, ready for the next Swift 24 event. For that, what I'm going to do is have a brand new function within this view here. Now, you could break this out into another view. To me, it's too basic of a view to be its own kind of SwiftUI view. So when it sort of has this like level of reusability needed, but simplicity, I have a function in place for it. And for that, all we're going to do is have a brand new function called timer button, which is going to be returning some, oops, I can type, I swear, maybe not actually, there we go, I can. Some view, and in here is going to be a button. I'm going to work with an action and a label. For now, that button is just going to print something to our log. It's going to say, I've been tapped, like so. And in the label, we're going to have some text, which for now is just going to be one button. So this will eventually be dynamic. But for now, this will be our start button. We're going to give it a, oh, no, we're not. We're going to give it some padding to make it look nice against the border. And you're going to see that border in 1 second. So vertical padding of about 8. Now, one of the really cool things with buttons for Vision Pro is they look kind of cool by default. It comes with some really cool styling. So if we was to add this to our VStack, like so. We just call through to this function to get that button, return it in our view, and pop it in like so. It's going to look pretty cool. It's definitely getting further and further away. So you can see we now have that. And if we hover over it, it will light up kind of wherever we start to hover our cursor over it, whether we look at it on that device. And now that it's sort of broken out into this function, we can have as many as we want. It'll be really important going forward, because sometimes we're going to want one button, sometimes we're going to want a couple. So to see that in action, we're going to have a H stack, and we could have a couple of buttons like so. Like so. When it comes to these buttons, we want them to take as much room as possible, but within reason. So we want them to fill the width, but if the user starts making this window absolutely huge, we don't want them to go too far out. So for that, what we're going to do is come down to our text down here, and we're going to add our frame to have a max width of about 200. So now, if we run again, in that default size, it's going to take up lots of room and look nice like so. And if I drag out this window, they're going to grow a little bit within reason and then stop, so they don't look absolutely huge. Now, these buttons are cool with their default styling, but they're a little bit bland, right? I want a little bit of color in there. And this is one of the biggest sort of decision points with design, I think, for apps for the Vision Pro. So what we want to do is add some color, but we don't want to be too bold. And you'll see what I mean in 1 second. For this, we can add some tint to our button. And as this is the start button for now, we're going to make it green. So I added this tint modifier to the button. And hit run. You can see they are now green, as you'd expect, but they're also, we've broken out the room. It's gone too far away. They're also quite bold in terms of how green they are. One of the kind of like golden design rules, I think, from Vision Pro is that we want to kind of not make it stand out too much. We want these apps to stay within the room so the user can see them and interact with them, but we still want to be able to kind of interact with the room around them. So we want it to be subtle, a bit like this glassy effect of the background here. Now, one of the really cool things is that we can do this very, very easily with our colors. So what we can do is color dot green for the start button, and we can work with the secondary version of this. And this will sort of tone it down just a little bit to make it look a lot nicer for the Vision Pro. Like so. So it's no longer bright and green and in your face. It's now a little bit more subtle. And now we have our first button set up. However, they're both start buttons, which we don't want. Like I said, we have 4 different buttons that we could be using for this app. We have start, we have stop, pause, and cancel at the end. So we want to pass something into this function to let us have control over what button we actually want right now. That is the perfect use for an enum. We have a limited number of options for the button sort of style, and we want a way to model them. So here in Xcode, brand new folder, so new group, which we're going to call models. And in there, new file, which I'm going to call button option. In here, we're going to have an enum for button option, and we're going to list out the different options for a button. So we have one, which is going to be start, one that's going to be stop, one that's going to be pause, and one that's going to be cancel. 4 different options that we can pass into that function to control what kind of button we're going to get. So let's make use of this. Let's grab that over in the content view, down in our function. Rather than calling through to get a timer button, we're now going to say what style we want, like so. Now we'll get some errors when we call through to our timer button because we're not giving it this option currently. So now what we can do is say, give me a timer button, but I want it to be a start button. And I want it to be a stop button, for example. So we now have that control over what button it's going to be. However, this doesn't do anything yet because we haven't told it what to do based on this property. As you can see, they're both start. We're getting further and further out of that room. Someone's going to jump onto this live stream like 20 minutes in, and there's just going to be no room. It's just going to be this empty space. So how can we do this? Well, what we want to do is use this button to impact the text and impact that tint. So a few different options for how we can go about doing this. But what we want to do, how I would sort of do this, is over in the button option, I'm going to add a few properties in here that we can call through to get that information out based on the option. So, let's start with the text. That's going to be our display text of type string. Now what we can do is switch on self, like so. So if we ever kind of get this option and it's start, what do we want it to return? If it's stop, what do we want it to return? And so on. So let's get this in and then we'll put it into place. And if you're not sure what I mean, it will all click into place. So here we're pretty much saying what text we want to show on the button for this button type. So for start, nice and simple, we'll say start. For stop, it's going to say stop. For pause, you probably guessed it, it's going to say pause. And for cancel, yep, cancel, nice. So what we can now do is use this as the text on our button. So over in the content view, rather than just saying start, we can take this option that we're passing in, whether that's start, stop, or whatever. We can say option from there and we can get access to the display text. So now, if we pass in start, for example, it's going to come over to here and say, okay, what am I going to do for start? So it's going to run it on start, which is self. It's going to find this and use that. It's stop, find this and use that, and so on. So we run that. We're going to now see the text for start and for stop. Let me know if anything isn't making sense as we go. The issue with this is the color is still green, which makes sense for start, but not necessarily for stop. So we can do the same sort of thing, but for the color. So over in the button option, we can have a var. We have that background color, which is going to be of type color, like so. I'm going to switch on self once again. And now for here, what we're going to do is have the actual main color. So we won't be working with secondary here in case you want to use this model anywhere else for like an iPhone version. So what we can do is just return color.green, or actually just .green. For stop and for cancel, which will happen at the very end once that timer is run out, we're going to return red. And for pause, we're going to return, let's get these in there to be nice and obvious what we're doing, orange. Oops, there it is. Now in the exact same way over here, rather than using color.green, we can take that option and we can get that background color. Again, welcome to the secondary version for that nice effect for Vision Pro. And we're going to run, and let's just make sure that's all working. Oh, hitting an error. So it turns out we can't find color over in our button option, which makes sense. I did this earlier on my rehearsal for this as well, where we're going to import SwiftUI because that's part of SwiftUI. Now, if we hit run, that color is going to be used. Like so. I wonder if I reset the camera, it's going to bring the view with me. Should we try it? Oh no, okay, it's tiny. But the important thing in there, you can see it's green and it's red. Let's walk through the wall over there. Simulators are fun sometimes. So we now have these two different styles and we can test this out, right? So say if we wanted to do start and do a pause, for example. Let's give that a test, make sure it's orange. Like so, using the correct text and the correct color. What we now want to do though is tie us up to the actual state of our timer. So we want to have different buttons depending on if the timer hasn't started running yet, if the timer is running, if it's stopped, if it's paused, whatever sort of state it's in. So the timer can be in 4 different current states. It can be, like I said, running, we pause, it can be stopped, or it can be finished. Again, another use of an enum. Oops. So back to Xcode, back into our models. We have another file in here, another Swift file. We have a comment from Kevin. Hello, Matt. I hope you're doing well. I started watching. Oh, nice. It's a common one, making me blush. Imagine if it's not now. I should have read it first. When I was 13 years old, I was able to publish free apps to the App Store. Very cool. Very cool. What apps did you make? I sort of love hearing about the apps that people sort of made. Like, because I started out in a very similar way. I sort of learned from YouTube and sort of built my career through that. And it's the main reason why I sort of got into doing YouTube, because I wanted to give that to other people. So hearing some of the success stories for YouTube as well is really, really cool. I'm going to ramble about that. I'm going to talk about it some more. But when we're doing timer state, enum, timer state. See, this is why streaming can be fun. Throw some stuff in the comments. Let's have a chat as we go. This enum is going to be, like I say, timer state, and it's going to have the different options for where our timer can be. So, nice, very cool. The different states can be running. This can be paused. It can be stopped, and it can be finished. And the way it's going to pretty much work is we're going to have a property which will hold that current state for the timer. And then once we do something with the timer, we're going to update it. And then the buttons will change depending on what this state currently is. That makes sense? So what we're going to do is we could have that property holding that state somewhere here within the view. I personally like to keep my views super, super lean. So it's literally focusing just on the UI. Any functionality should be out of the view, in my opinion, in most cases. Obviously, with coding, there's a million different ways to do anything. As long as it sort of works within reason, there's no kind of wrong answer. Again, within reason. So I'm going to make a brand new file which will hold that state. It's going to hold all the logic for our timer, which can be our view model in this case. So it's going to look a bit like a view model. It's a brand new file. It's going to be the content view model, like so. And in here, we are going to have a brand new class for our content view model. And it's going to hold that timer state. So it's going to hold all our logic for that timer, but for now it's going to hold the state as well. So var is going to change. Timer state of type timer state, and it's going to start by being stopped. When you launch that app for the first time, it's going to be stopped. So over in the content view, we can now make use of this view model. So we're going to have a brand new view model, which would be the content view model. And this is going to hold that property. So what we can then do down here in our H stack is have different buttons depending on that current state. We can switch on view model dot timer state, and it's pretty much going to say what do we want, what buttons do we want when it's running, when it's paused, when it's stopped, when it's finished. This is tucked within our H stack, so we can literally just list them out. If it's running, then we want two buttons. We're going to have, according to my notes, we're going to have pause and stopped. If it's paused, what we want is start and stop, so that the user kind of carry on their time or reset it back 24 hours. If it's running, obviously we want to be able to pause to temporarily stop it or stop it to go back 24 hours. If it's stopped, we only have one more option from there. We can't pause if it's stopped, so we can just start. So timer button dot start, and if it's finished, if it's hit 0, then the only way we can sort of go from there is stop to reset back to 24 hours. So now our buttons are going to change depending on what that state currently is. And we get working with the actual timer itself, then we're going to update that state at the same time to reflect that in our UI. But let's give this a test. Currently in the view model, it's set to stop. So it's going to only have this one button, which will be for start. Let's give that a go. As you can see, one button for start. If this was something else, which we will eventually do by tapping on these buttons. So if it was running, For example, we're going to get 2 buttons in there because this here is going to be saying pause and stop. We now have pause and we have stop. So it's all just doing the wiring for now before we actually get in and do that timer. Again, let me know if any of this is not making sense. So one of the things we want to do is obviously listen out to when this state property changes, because it's going to start off at one thing and it will change as we go. So what we're going to do for this is make use of some of the really cool stuff that come with SwiftUI in iOS 17. I'm going to use the @observable macro for this. So rather than kind of conforming to observable object and marking certain properties as published, what we can do is just have @observable. Sorry, we can have @observable like so, and this will now let us listen out to these changes. We haven't got to mark this as published; it will just sort of do it for us. Over in the content view, we now want to mark this as state, so we can know we want the body to update for us when something changes. And because it's a state, that's now got to be a var. We can't use let when it comes to working with state. So we now have the bare bones ready to go for our buttons and that state. We now want to be able to change state, ready for us to work with the actual timer itself. So how are we going to do this? Well, we want to have some different functions over in the view model, and that's going to let us sort of trigger different certain events for our timer. So for this timer, we can start it, we can pause it, we can stop it, we can finish it, just like we can in our states over there. So in here, in the view model, we have some functions to reflect these. I have start timer, and this is going to run when we tap on the start timer button, right? We want to have pause timer, which again is going to run when we tap on that pause button. We're going to have stop timer, which is going to happen when we tap on the stop button, and we're going to have a finish timer, which is going to happen when our timer runs out and we hit 0 seconds, 0 minutes, 0 hours, and that's going to trigger to end that timer. In each of these, we want to update the state and eventually do something to a timer, which we'll get into. So in the start timer, we want to set our timer state to running. In pause, we want to set that state to paused. In stop timer, we're going to set it to stopped. And in finish timer, we're going to set it to finished. We now want to make use of these with our actual buttons. So I'll hold it there for 1 second for anybody coding along, if anyone is. Over into the content view, we now want to change what this button is going to do. So currently it's just printing I've been tapped down to the log, which is not very useful. So what we want to do is run a different action depending on what option this button is. So what we're going to do, keep this nice and simple. We're going to do a little switch statement here. And we could have done this over in the view model where we sort of pass through the option into like a button has been tapped function. Going sort of back and forth on what we want to do in this video all day. We'll do our switch statement here for now. So if we tap on the button when it's the start button, what we do is call through to our view model to say, run the code for start timer, that function over here. If we tap on it when it's the stop button, it's stop timer. If it's the pause timer. And if it's cancelled at one at the very, very end, then that's also stop timer. My bad. So let's combine the two here, because if we hit the cancel button, it's going to reset that timer back to 24 hours, ready for us to start again. So if you stop it or cancel it at the end, it's going to do the exact same logic. Just with that, our buttons will now be tied up to our state. Let's give it a run. And let's start the state back to how it should be at the very start. So over in the view model, let's change that to stopped. So when you want to run the app to start with, it's going to be stopped. As you can see, we open the app. Long path of all to that room could keep running further away. But now if I hit the start button, it's going to update that state to be running. So we're going to pause and stop. Here we can pause, so we can start and we can stop. And we can stop to go back to that initial state. So now we have all of our states set up and our buttons are in place to sort of reflect that. We'll jump in and now actually make it work with an actual timer for the functionality of this app, which doesn't have to take very long. So before I jump onto that, just the people on the live stream, only a few of us here, which is still pretty cool. Any questions about any of that? Everything sort of making sense? Anything not making sense? Anything you want me to go over again? I don't know how long to wait. There's assuming there's going to be no comments. If anything does come through, we can jump back. So over then to our timer logic. A few things we want to do. So we're going to have that actual timer, which will count down the time. And it's going to update a string. And that string is going to be used here in this text label. So currently it's just hard coded to 24 hours. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. It's going to actually show the time left on our timer in the Swift 24 event. It's that hackathon at the weekend. All details down in the description. So let's move this out into our view model. We're going to impact that in a second. So grab the 24-hour string and brand new property in here, which we're going to call display text. And it's going to start off at 24 hours, like so. Take our display text, and we will use that in here. So now, whatever value is that, it's going to be in the view model.display text. Of course it is. Now, whatever value we have in the view model for that string will be displayed here. And now we can impact that through our actual timer. There's a few different ways that you can sort of go about doing this sort of timer. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to manually track the hours, the minutes, and the seconds left, and then every second just sort of tick our way down. And there's a few ways, like I said, of doing that. Again, with anything in code, there's different ways of doing stuff. Like, for example, we could take different dates and compare them. Very heavy for this sort of simple app. We could sort of just keep track of how many seconds have gone past our timer, convert that into seconds, minutes, and hours. Again, quite heavy. I think this is probably the leanest route for an app this sort of simple. So what I'm going to do is 3 new properties then. One for the hours left, one for the minutes left, and one for the seconds left. These will be private because we never want to impact these outside of this view model. We're going to be getting these values into the string to use, but we never want to have that direct access to these outside of this class here. So private bar. And the hours is going to start at 24. The minutes is going to start at 0. And the seconds, seconds is going to start also at 0. Now, if you want to sort of take this app and expand upon it, which I really recommend people do to play around with it, giving the user an option to set whatever time they actually want is a really good way. Again, this is 24 hours ready for that 24-hour hackathon at the weekend. And if you want to see it, we can do another stream where I sort of make that functionality in there for the timer. I think one of the really cool examples of Vision Pro apps is obviously having like a timer like over your stove or over whatever to sort of show how long something's been cooking for. And you probably wouldn't go be too much more work than this to sort of get to that stage. So if you want to sort of see how that works, it could be another stream we can do very soon. So this here is going to control the hours, the minutes, and the seconds that we have left. What we then want to do is have a timer, and that's going to handle doing some code at every sort of timed interval, which is going to be, again, private. We only want to access that within this class, which will be timer. And we can set that back to nil. It's going to start off at nil to make it an optional timer. And we're going to give that a value when we start the timer down here. So into the start timer function, then let's set up our timer. This is going to be timer. That timer is going to equal timer.schedule timer. And the one we care about is this one here. We want it to run every 1 second. We want it to repeat, so happen after 1 second, and then another second, and so on. And in the block of code we want to happen then is going to be the following. we can make this trailing like so for a little bit more readability. We don't really want to interact with the timer object we get from this closure. So an underscore, we don't really want to use that. All we want to do is run some code to tick down our time. So let's start to do that. So what we want to do here is effectively take away 1 second. Simple as that, right? Every second, take off a second. So let's have a brand new function for that, which we're going to call update seconds. And what we want to do, like I said, is take away 1 second. But there's a few different things that we need to keep track of here. We want to take a second away if there's still time left within the current minute. If there isn't, then we run out of time in this minute and we want to update the minutes. So it will go from 9 minutes down to 8 minutes 59, for example. It's one of those things that the code it's fairly straightforward, but it's really strangely hard to explain. I don't know why. So what we're going to do is effectively say if the seconds that are left, if that is greater than 0, so we have some seconds left within the minute, then all we're going to do is seconds minus 1, take 1 off. But if seconds isn't greater than 0, then we run out of how many seconds are left in the minute. Seconds left in the minute. It feels like a weird way to word it. I hope it's making sense. Because if that's not the case, we then want to go on to update our minutes to tick down 1 minute. So another function down here for update minutes. And we're going to do the same sort of thing. So if minutes is greater than 0, when we call through this, then just take 1 off of the minutes. But if minutes is 0, then we run out of minutes in the hour. We have to call through to update the hour. So that up there. So we're going to take 1 off our seconds if there's any seconds left within a minute. If not, cool down, update the minutes, and update the seconds back to 59 to go from, like I say, 9 minutes down to 8 minutes 59. Making sense? Same sort of thing for the hours then if we don't have more than 0 minutes. We have update hours, where if hours is greater than 0, take 1 off of the hours, reset the minutes back to 59, reset the seconds back to 59 to keep that sort of ticking down when we take 1 off of our hours. Otherwise, the timer has finished. So, and that goes in there, sorry. Just to recap that, what we're going to do is every second, we're going to call down to this function here to update seconds. What we're going to do is take 1 second off how many seconds we have left in our timer. If that's greater than 0, then all we've got to do is take 1 off. Nice and simple. If it hits 0, it means we have to then take 1 minute off naturally. So if it's not greater than 0, call through to update minutes. But what we do if we have minutes left in the hour is take 1 off our minutes and reset the seconds back to 59. But if there's no minutes left, call through to update the hour because we run out of minutes in the hour. I don't know how this is the hardest bit about explaining how to make something simple for the Vision Pro headset. I really hope it makes sense. I've overthought the explanation for this. But let me know if it doesn't make sense and we'll go over it again. All that's left to do is actually call through to this update seconds within the timer. Now, because this is a closure, we're going to get told off because we're making access of self, trying to get access to the functions outside of this closure. So what we're going to do up here, get a weak access to self to make sure we don't somehow run into any retain cycles, even though I don't take a second to run, and that should be good to go. So every second, call through to update the seconds, potentially update the minutes, potentially update the hours, and also check if that timer is finished or update the hours. That's all well and good. So our timer is now going to update, and it's going to update these 3 values here to reflect how much time we have left. But our display text is always going to be set to 24 hours like so. So the next thing we have to do is go on to update that text. For this, one more function over here in the view model. which is going to be, again, a private function. And it's going to be update display text. And we're going to call this just after we've finished updating that time up here. So we're going to call through, update the seconds, potentially update the minutes, potentially update the hours, and then call through to update that display text. And all we want to do here is take that display text and set it to show the remaining hours, the remaining minutes, and the remaining seconds. Right. We're going to run into a weird bug. I wonder, it's not a bug. It's like, see if you can think about what that might be as we run it. But just to recap, what we're going to do is call through every second to update our seconds and update that display text. And that display text is being used over in the content view in our text here. So let's hit run. And because we're already starting that timer by triggering this function, we tap on that start button, our timer is now going to be up and running. Like so. It's going to start ticking down. But like I say, we're going to run into something that isn't really ideal from a user experience viewpoint. And to see that, we're actually going to wait for this number here to get under 10 seconds. So again, it's another great chance. If you have any questions about any of that, please let me know in the comments. And I can sort of address them as we go. We're going to wait for this to hit 10 seconds, which is taking longer than I had planned for it to be. 50 seconds is a long time. We've got 10 seconds left. Again, if you're watching, post something in the comments. Let's have a chat about this. But what's going to happen is under 10 seconds, there it is. It goes down to 9. Let's pause this. Ooh, okay, we haven't got our pause setting just yet. I thought we did, but we now missed it. So what it's doing is not saying 07, it's just saying 7, for example, right? And that makes sense because what we're doing down here is just showing our hours, our minutes, and our seconds, whether that's 10 or just 7, for example. We want to have a way for this to say, if it's under 10, to say 07, 06, whatever. So I think the nicest way of handling this is we have an extension on integer here, which we can call through and get some sort of display text. So another group over here in Xcode, which would be for our extensions. And in there, brand new file, which we're going to call int. And this is going to return a displayable value. So the name of our file is going to be that new functionality that we're going to give to integer. And all we can do is extend integer. So we can take these values here and return the value that we actually want to show in that string. So what we're going to do is have a brand new computer property on it, which is going to be displayable value of type string. And what we're going to do is say if that integer that we run it on, so if self is greater than 9, then just return the string, which is just this pure value. So it's already 10 or above, so we haven't got to worry about adding that 0 on. Otherwise, we're going to return 0 self. So if it's under 10, so like 7, 6, 5, whatever, and then we are going to have 0 and then that value. Then what we can do over here is say hours, take the integer and use the displayable value like so. And that's going to do all that logic for us, tucked away in the extension, so we haven't got to worry about that. So just to recap on that, this hours here, for example, is the integer we're going to run it on. That could be 24 or it could be 2, for example. And rather than just showing that, we're going to call through this displayable value. And what that would do is it's going to check, see if it's greater than 9, so 10 or above. And then we don't want to add a 0 on, which is going to return that as a string. Otherwise, have a 0 beforehand, like so. that should solve that little issue. I'm going to run it again. And now we're going to have another 50 seconds to wait. So another great chance to post any questions if any of that didn't make any sense. Excellent. But yeah, let me know what other projects you're sort of working on. I know some comments down there about your projects. I mean, you know, sort of what you're up to is always fun to hear. One of the things I was going to sort of mention, if anyone is in the UK watching this, tomorrow there is a tech meetup for mobile stuff in Leeds, which is Leeds Mobile. I'll be there for listening to the talk. We're doing a talk there next month, my first sort of talk at tech meetup next month. So anyone in the UK who is interested in that, get on to Leeds. I'll be there tomorrow. It'd be cool to say hey in person. And as you can see, now 10 will go down to 0, 9, and work as expected. And once it goes to 59 seconds for the next minute down, it's going to go back to not having that 0, like so. So a weird little kind of bug there, which we have now avoided. So we're nearly there, you know, it's all sort of coming together. But as I just realized a minute ago, pause doesn't work currently. Stop doesn't work. The state's updating, but that timer isn't really doing anything for it. So let's jump back into our functions down here for pause, stop, and finish. And let's handle those. And then all we've got left is a little bit of polish, and we're there. So we're close. So what do we want to happen when we call through the pause timer in addition to updating that state? Well, we want to take our timer. We want to invalidate it to stop it. And then we're going to set it back to nil. What's going to happen is we're going to, from here, either call through to stop or call through to start. And if we call through to start, that's going to recreate a timer for us. So we're going to stop the timer and reset it back to nil. For stop, same sort of thing, with a little bit extra. Oops, timer, we're going to invalidate it to stop it. Set it back to nil. But then what also we want to do, we want to reset our time back to 24 hours. So we're going to do hours is 24. Minutes is 0. Seconds is 0. And because we now change these, we want to call through to our update display text to update the string, which is going to update the actual label that you see. Finally, if we finish, and it's going to happen when that timer hits 0, which happens up here. So if the hours run out, we sort of tick down, then we actually need to call through to that. Finish timer just here. Then what we want to do is invalidate that timer once again. Oops, knocking stuff all over the place. Invalidate. See, in the past, I just edit that out. Maybe editing was the way to go. And we can set timer to nil, like so. And then from there, the user can cancel to hit stop, which will stop to reset it back to 24 hours. And that's really all the logic for our functions, for our timer. And that's already all wired up, linked up to our state already. So now we can jump in and actually use it. From there, once we check it, a few tiny things left to polish off. We are moving in very, very quickly now for the win. So now what we can do is we can start. We can pause. We can start again. And we can stop. Reset it back to 24 hours, like so. If we wanted to test that finish logic as well, let's change this down to 0 hours and maybe 5 seconds to start. We keep that starting text as 24 hours. But when we hit start on that timer, it will just start at 5 seconds. Oops, let me zoom. There it is. So you can see, so I'm going down to 5, down to 4, and I'm going to hit 0. We're going to update our state into stop, and then from there we can reset back to what would be 24 hours. So 24, 0, 0. So a few tiny things left to do then. One is a bit of a precaution. What we want to do over in the start timer. And this is very much just building a safety net around this, because what could happen is we could get in a position where this timer is running multiple times. We can create a brand new timer and an old one will keep going. And what would then happen is multiple times every second, we're taking 1 second off, and that timer is going to go really, really quick. And you get into a really weird position. So what I want to do is only let this logic work here in the start timer if the timer isn't currently running. So with guard statement, I'm going to say start the timer state even. If that isn't equal to running, then return. So now it's going to check this logic here. And if it is set to running, we're going to bail out and therefore not go on to run. Timer state, if it's, so check. So only let the following happen if the timer state isn't running. So if it's stopped, paused, or the other one, then we can carry on. If it's running, it won't go on to do this. So we're in a nice position to make sure it's only ever can happen at one at a time. The only other thing that's left for us to do is a little bit of animation polish. So as you can see, we are currently ticking down like so, and it's updating and it's looking fine. But SwiftUI gives us some really cool animations out of the box. And one of the ones that fits in very, very nicely here is making SwiftUI know that this is a numerical value and then having an animation on there, and it will sort of like actually tick down. You'll see what I mean. And to do this, all we have to do is go to our text object. We are going to set the content transition to numeric text. So it knows we're working with numbers. And then we're going to have an animation. And we're going to pass in what sort of animation we want and when this should be triggered. So for this, we just use a default animation. So no kind of different pace as it would sort of come out of the box. And this is going to happen when the view model dot display text changes. So when that string updates, this animation will be triggered. And it's going to look pretty cool for us just with that. And that is going to wrap it up once this all works. So if it lets me drag in, there we go. We're now a long way out of that room. If I hit start, we now get that really fancy animation in there, like so. And that is how we put together our first app for Vision Pro. It's all going to be set up, working with our state as expected. And that's kind of it. We got through the first stream. It was always going to be rocky. It was always going to be a little bit rough. But we got through it. Let me end sharing the screen like so. What I'm going to do, I'll upload this code somewhere on GitHub with a link down in the video description at some point after this stream ends. So if you want to get access to that, play around with it, you can download it pretty quick. And that is that. That is the first stream done here on Matt Heaney Apps. Thank you very much for the comments. As always, like I genuinely mean it. Like any feedback at all, I'd really appreciate it. It's something I'd love to build my skills in. If you thought it was awful, genuinely let me know. Let me know why you thought it was awful, and I'll fix it. And together we can get better at this. Let's bring streams to this channel. Let's get the teaching going again on Matt Heaney Apps, and let's go from there. If you have any questions or any comments after this stream ends, or if you're watching it in the future, let me know down in the comments. And I guess we will wrap it up there. Thank you very much if you watched live. Thank you very much if you watched in the future. Check the video description for info on Swift 24. It's this weekend if you're watching this live. It's monthly if you're not watching it live. I think it's going to be a really good event. But yeah, thank you for watching. That was a lot of fun. And I will see you very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.